mom's homemade dumplings. Before I could take a bite, the bully pinched his nose. Your food stinks. Then he Every lunch, I opened my mom's homemade dumplings. Before I could take a bite, the bully pinched his nose. Your food stinks. Then he knocked my lunch onto the floor. His friends laughed. The bully looked at me. What are you gonna do about it? I looked down, picked up every dumpling, one by one. Then I said, not yet. The next day, he dumped my lunch into the garbage. What about now? Not yet. A week later, he shoved me into my locker. His friends surrounded me. You gonna fight back? Not yet. They laughed even harder. Months passed, everyone thought I was scared. What nobody knew was every night I'd wake up and see the kitchen light on. My mom still wearing her work clothes, folding dumplings long after midnight. She had work the next morning, but she still made them every day. Before the sun came up, I was training, running, lifting, learning how to fight, because every morning I remembered those dumplings lying on the cafeteria floor, and I trained harder. Then one Friday, he grabbed my lunch and threw it away before I even opened it. I looked down at the dumplings sitting in the garbage. He laughed. What? Your mom can just make more. Then he leaned closer. It's not like she has anything better to do. For the first time, I looked him in the eyes. After school, he stopped laughing. What? You and me, we're done waiting. He smiled. You better call an ambulance. You're gonna need one after this. By the final bell, half the school was waiting outside. The bully stepped into the circle, laughing. He finally grew a spine. I took off my backpack and set it on the ground. I didn't say a word. He charged and threw the first punch, but I could see them, the punches. Before they happened, left hook, I ducked. Right hook, I stepped aside. Another punch, missed. Another, missed. Months of training made everything feel slower. The crowd started cheering. The bully got angrier. He swung harder, faster, but he couldn't touch me. Then he stopped. He looked around and grabbed a brick. The crowd went silent. For the first time, I stopped moving because I realized dodging his punches wasn't enough. I had spent months learning how to avoid getting hurt, but if I didn't stop him, someone else would get hurt next. He charged, holding the brick above his head. I waited until the last second. Then I stepped forward and threw one punch right on his jaw. The brick fell from his hand. His eyes rolled back. His body went limp. He hit the pavement. I looked past him at every friend who laughed, who shoved me, who mocked my mom's cooking. One of them laughed. What are you looking at? I looked past him. Not you. The ambulance. I called for him. Every lunch, I opened my mom. My dog wouldn't stop barking at me over and over. I looked at his food bowl, empty. You hungry? I filled it. He didn't even look. He just kept barking. That wasn't normal. Every morning before I left for school, Milo waited by the front door. I scratched behind his ears, give him a treat, then he'd watch me leave. He never barked, never tried to stop me until today. He stepped in front of the door, barking. Then he grabbed my sleeve and started pulling. You need to go outside? I reached for his leash. He ignored it. So I opened the back door. Usually he'd sprint into the yard. This time he didn't move. He just looked at me, then barked again. What do you want? I grabbed his favorite tennis ball, the one he never ignored. I tossed it. It rolled right past him. He didn't even look. Instead, he ran down the hallway, stopped outside my mom's bedroom, and barked again. I sighed. My mom always sleeps in. Leave her alone. He barked louder. I walked over. Milo, keep this up and you're not getting treats. But he didn't care. He started scratching at our bedroom door hard. I'd never seen him do that before, so I grabbed his collar and pulled him away. He fought against me harder than he ever had before. The second I let go, he sprinted right back, scratching even harder. He ignored everything. His favorite toy, his favorite treat, nothing mattered except getting me to open that door. Something was wrong. So I opened it. My mom was exactly what she'd always be, still asleep. I smiled. See, I started closing the door. Then I froze. The room was silent, too silent. My mom always snored every morning. Mom? No answer. I stepped closer. Her hand hung over the side of the bed. I picked it up, cold. My heart started racing. I shook her shoulder. Mom? Nothing. I grabbed my phone and called 911. The ambulance arrived minutes later. The doctors rushed her inside. I sat in the waiting room holding Milo's leash, both of us praying she'd be okay. Hours later, a doctor walked out. If she'd gotten here even 1 minute later, we couldn't have saved her. I looked down at Milo. He looked back at me, tail wagging. I reached into my pocket and pulled out his favorite treat, the same one he ignored that morning. This time he took it. I smiled. You deserve the whole bag. My dog wouldn't stop barking. He spat out the dumpling. Everyone in the restaurant went silent because this wasn't just anyone. He was the world's most famous competitive eater. And after one bite, he looked at my mom and said, "This is the worst dumpling I've ever had." My mom didn't say anything because deep down, she knew her restaurant was already struggling. Some days we didn't even sell 10 dumplings. But what he didn't know was that this restaurant was the last thing my dad left us. My parents opened this place together. They spent years building it. Every table, every recipe, every corner of the restaurant held a memory of him. But after my dad passed away, my mom kept it running alone. Even when business slowed down, even when it got harder every year, she refused to let go. Then the competitive eater stood up. Before leaving, he pointed at the biggest dumpling on the menu. "I'll make you a deal. If someone here can finish that, I'll tell my followers this is the best dumpling shop I've ever been to. But if they fail, you close this place." My mom immediately refused. "We're not risking our restaurant." He smirked. I figured, then turned toward the door. "Wait, I'll do it." My mom grabbed my arm. "You've never done anything like this." I looked at the empty tables, then at her. "If I don't, we lose anyway." She closed her eyes, then quietly nodded. A giant bamboo steamer was placed in front of me. Inside was one massive dumpling. The timer started 60 minutes. The first few bites were easy. Then my stomach started fighting back. Every bite was harder than the last. Halfway through, the competitive eater leaned back, smiling. I knew it, but I kept eating. One bite, then another. Soon, only a quarter remained. His smile disappeared. He stood up, walked over, and accidentally knocked my water onto the dumpling. It soaked straight through, making every bite twice as heavy. He shrugged. "Oops." My mom reached for the plate. "That's enough." "Not yet." 5 minutes, 3 bites. 1 minute, 1 bite. The timer started beeping. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I swallowed the final bite. The competitive eater stared at the empty plate. Then laughed. "Fake. You switched the dumpling. There's no way a kid finished that." Then he stormed out the front door. His cameraman never moved. He looked down at his camera, then said, "I got everything." That night, he uploaded the footage, the cheating, the excuses, everything. By the next morning, millions of people had watched a famous competitive eater lose, then blame a kid for cheating. A week later, people lined up around the block. My mom looked out the window. "Do you think they're here for the challenge?" I looked at the customers walking out, carrying boxes of dumplings. "They came for the challenge. They'll come back for your dumplings." He spat out the dumpling. My dad stood up in the middle of the audience and walked out. I'd never seen him leave a competition before. My brother never showed up. Nobody knew why, not even me. Every time my brother missed a note, my dad would stop him and say, again. Sometimes he'd spend 20 minutes playing the same 10 seconds over and over. Then, the moment he finally got it right, my dad would smile. "That's my son." Every competition, my parents sat in the front row. Every trophy went into the cabinet above our fireplace. Sometimes I'd stand there, imagining one with my name on it. I wanted to learn piano too, not because I loved music, because I wanted my parents to look at me the way they looked at him. Then one afternoon, a second piano arrived. I couldn't stop smiling. I thought, finally, this one's for me. But my dad never called me downstairs. Days turned into weeks. The piano stayed untouched, except by my brother. Every afternoon he practiced 4 hours, without missing a day. Whenever I walked toward the piano, he'd stop me. Dad said, "I'm practicing." Then he'd close the door. Eventually, I stopped asking. Until years later, I finally asked my mom, "Why didn't dad ever teach me?" She looked down, then quietly said, "The day the second piano arrived, your dad told your brother, now both my boys can become pianists." Your brother looked at him and said, "If he has to practice, I'm done." Your dad laughed. He thought your brother was bluffing. He wasn't. He skipped the biggest competition of his life. Then he refused to touch the piano. Days passed, then weeks. Your dad begged him to play again. Your brother only said one thing: you'll have one pianist or none. The next morning, he sat back down and practiced for another 8 years. I looked at my mom, but why? Her eyes filled with tears. He knew exactly what those 4 hours felt like. He wanted you outside, riding your bike, playing with your friends, having the childhood he never had. That's when I looked at the trophy cabinet, and for the first time, I didn't envy it. I understood, but every trophy had really cost. My entire childhood, I thought my brother had everything. I never realized he gave it all up so I wouldn't have to. My dad stood up in the middle of the audience and walked out. I snorted ramen noodles through my nose for the 5th time that week. because once they realized it happened when I laughed, the bullies turned it into a game. They'd hand me food, tell me to eat it, then do everything they could to make me laugh. They all thought I was just some fat kid who couldn't stop eating. What they didn't know was every meal started at home. Every morning before school, I'd cook, taste it, adjust it, taste it again until it was perfect. It had to be because my mom had been sick for years. The medicine changed how food tasted. If one flavor was even slightly off, she wouldn't eat. So every day I learned exactly how much soy sauce, exactly how much salt, exactly how much sesame oil. Then I'd eat breakfast with her, eat lunch at school, and finish whatever she couldn't. She always smiled and said food shouldn't be wasted. By the end of every day, I'd eaten enough for 2 people. The next morning, our principal announced, after school we're holding a cooking competition. First prize, $1,000. 1 month of mom's medicine. I wrote my name down. The bullies saw it and burst out laughing. The fat kid? I guess eating counts as practice. After school, the competition began. I made mom's fried rice. The same fried rice I'd cooked hundreds of times. Halfway through, I turned around to grab another egg, and when I looked back, one of the bullies had emptied an entire bag of white powder into my wok. The crowd gasped. Ew, he's putting chemicals in his food. Even the judges started whispering. I picked up the bag, MSG. I couldn't help but smile, because in our house, MSG wasn't the problem. Too much of it was. I tasted the fried rice. Not yet. Too salty, too strong. Most people would have thrown it away, but I'd spent years fixing food before my mom ever took a bite. I grabbed another pan, added more rice, more eggs, more vegetables, then balanced it with soy sauce, sesame oil, and a little garlic. Then a final touch of spring onions. Every ingredient had a purpose, just like my mom taught me. The bullies thought they ruined my dish, but they didn't realize they were testing the exact thing I'd practiced every single day. The judges tasted it, one looked at the others, then back at me. The balance is incredible. Another judge smiled. Who taught you to cook like this? I looked over at the bullies, then answered, eating. The same kids who laughed every lunch couldn't even look at me. Then the judges announced the winner, me. Turns out eating was practice. I snorted. I handed my dad my report card. He stared at it, then walked into the garage. A few seconds later, I heard metal scraping across the concrete, and something heavy slammed into the wall. I stood outside the garage door, too scared to open it. The only thing on my report card was 1B. Up until then, I'd never gotten anything below an A. That night, I barely slept. All I could think about was what my dad was doing behind that door. The next morning, I finally opened the garage. The ping pong table was gone, and so was my paddle, the one he'd given me when I was 6. I looked through every closet, every cabinet, until I spotted it, sitting on my dad's shelf. I reached for it, but he stopped me. You're done playing. I looked at him. Because of 1B? He didn't answer, and for months, the table stayed gone. My paddle stayed on his shelf, and after a while, I stopped thinking he'd ever change his mind. So one night, after I heard him snoring, I crept into his room, and I grabbed the paddle, and for the first time in months, it was back in my hands. And then I turned it over, and there was a name, carved into the bottom. My dad's? I froze. This wasn't my paddle. It was his. The next day, I went back into the garage, and behind the shelves, I found an old box. Inside were dusty trophies, then pictures of my dad, about my age, holding the same paddle, standing beside those same trophies, and at the very bottom was an old report card. 1B folded inside it was a note. No more ping pong until your grades improve. I just stood there staring at it. That's when I understood. My dad wasn't angry, he was terrified I'd end up just like him. That night, I found him sitting alone in the garage. I held out the paddle, he took it, and ran his thumb across the name carved into the wood. I asked, did you ever miss playing? He looked down at the paddle and smiled. Every day. And after a long silence, he looked at me, then quietly said, help me set the table back up. We played our first game together, and this time, neither of us kept score. I handed my dad. The bullies squeezed my eyes even tighter. I didn't think they could get any smaller. The whole class laughed. Every single day they'd cover my eyes, throw things at me, even ask if I could see at all. They thought they knew why I looked different, but they had no idea why I actually squinted. Every night I helped my mom take her medicine. The labels were tiny. The instructions were even smaller. 2 millimeters, take after dinner. One mistake could send her back to the hospital. We couldn't afford glasses. Every dollar we had went toward keeping her alive. So every night I'd squint harder and harder until I didn't even realize I was doing it at school too. And the bully always noticed, especially during gym class, because whenever we played dodgeball, he found the perfect excuse. He could hurt me and call it a game. The next day was our biggest dodgeball game of the year, and I already knew he was going to make sure I lost. But before that game, something happened. One morning, I accidentally packed my mom's medicine. Before I could stop him, the bully snatched it out of my bag. What we've got here? He held it above his head. Drugs? The class burst into laughter. Then he threw the bottle into the trash. Just buy more. I froze because he didn't understand. That wasn't just a bottle. It was the only one we had until next month. That night, I sat beside my mom, trying not to cry, but she noticed me squinting at the medicine bottle again. The next morning, she handed me a small wrap box. I was saving this for you. Inside were my very first pair of glasses. I put them on, and for the first time, everything was clear. The world, the words, and the smile on my mom's face. A few hours later, gym class, dodgeball. Somehow, it came down to me and him. The whistle blew. He didn't care about winning. He just wanted to hurt me. He threw. The ball slammed into my forehead. Headshots don't count, the teacher shouted. He smiled, picked up another ball right between my eyes. The class laughed. Again, he grabbed one last ball. What? Still can't see me? Slowly, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my glasses, and put them on. For the first time, the gym wasn't blurry. I could see every line on the court, every dodgeball, every movement. He charged, certain I'd miss. But this time, I didn't have to guess. I picked up the ball, took one step, and threw. It flew straight past his hand and hit him directly in the waist. The whistle echoed through the gym. Out! The entire class went silent. The same people who laughed at me were now watching me. I took off my glasses because they didn't deserve to be seen clearly by the glasses my mom bought me. The bully squeezed my... I spent months putting dots on my dad's wall every single day, and I had no idea why. Put one here, move it slightly to the left. Another one. Hours just placing tiny bumps across his walls. At first, I didn't mind. It was something I did with my dad. We'd sit together, talk, laugh, and work on the wall. But after months, it became exhausting. Our friends were hanging out, playing games, making memories, and I was stuck putting dots on a wall. One night, I finally snapped. Why do you keep making me do this? You never even tell me why. My dad looked at the wall, then looked back at me. Someday, you'll understand. I didn't want to wait for some day, so when my friends invited me out, I went. For the first time in months, I wasn't in my dad's room. I wasn't placing dots. I was just being a normal kid. Then, my phone rang. It was the hospital. My dad had collapsed. I ran there as fast as I could, but when I walked into his room, I barely recognized him. The doctor looked at me. Your dad never told you? Told me what? His eyesight had been getting worse for years, and eventually he would lose it completely. That's when the doctors handed me a piece of paper. It was a translation of the dots on my dad's wall. They weren't random, they were dates. The day he taught me how to cook rice. The day I rode a bike without training wheels. The day I won my first award. The day I told him I wanted to be just like him. Every dot was a memory. Every mark was a moment he was afraid of losing. My dad wasn't making me decorate his room. He was building a way to remember the life we had together. I spent months putting dots on my dad's wall. He handed me a black envelope. Inside was enough money that my mom would never have to work again. He said, one job, that's all. I looked down at the envelope, then I remembered every night I ate cup ramen alone. My mom wouldn't get home until after midnight. She worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. A year earlier, my dad stood at our front door. He looked at my mom, then at me, and said, I'm going to fix this. Then he left. A year passed, still no calls, no letters, nothing. One afternoon, everyone at school was opening the new Pokemon packs. I asked my mom if I could have one too. She smiled. We'll see. The next morning, one was waiting on my desk. I ran downstairs to thank her, but she was already gone. I opened the fridge. There was almost nothing inside. That's when I realized she skipped groceries so I could fit in. That day, I decided I'd make enough money so she'd never have to work again. That night, 5 of us drove through an empty street. One of them pulled out a zip tie, then pointed at me. Tie his hands. I frowned. Whose? Yours. Before I could react, they grabbed me. That's when I realized I wasn't part of the mission. I was the mission. Before anyone could move, gunshots echoed through the street. The man beside me dropped, then another, then another. Within seconds, I was the only one left. Heavy footsteps echoed toward me. A man stepped out of the darkness, his face hidden. He cut the zip ties off my wrists, and the black envelope fell from my pocket. His shoulders dropped. They gave you one too. I stared at him. How do you know what this is? He slowly pulled down his mask. Dad? He closed his eyes. I was supposed to come home tomorrow. Then headlights appeared at the end of the street. He glanced behind me. They found us. He pulled the pistol from his jacket, checked the magazine, then looked back at me. They gave me the same envelope. I left so I could make enough money for our family. When I finished, I told them I was done. They smiled. I thought they were letting me leave. The next morning, I found out they recruited a new kid. His voice began to shake. Then I saw your name. My heart stopped. You were never the new recruit. You were my hostage. They knew I'd never leave if they had you. So before they could bring you to me, I found them first. Car doors started slamming shut, one after another. He tore the envelope in half. Go. What about you? He looked at me. I left so you and your mom could have a better life. I'm not letting them take that away. He pushed me toward the alley. I turned back. Dad! He smiled, then raised his pistol. A week later, someone knocked on our front door. My mom opened it and couldn't move. She thought she was seeing a ghost. My dad had finally come home. That night, for the first time in over a year, the three of us ate dinner together. He handed me a black envelope. Inside, a group from the biggest dojo in town walked through our doors. Their master looked around and laughed. 3 people using an entire dojo? You're wasting this place. My dad lowered his head. He was ready to leave. Before he could, I stepped forward. Then fight for it. The room went silent. Their master smiled. 1 match. Your best student against mine. No weapons, no interference. Next week. My dad grabbed my shoulder. What are you doing? You've never even sparred. He wasn't wrong. Every morning my dad called me outside. Time to train. But training never lasted long. My little sister always waited beside us. She dreamed of learning too, but she couldn't. She was born with an immune disease, so instead, my dad taught us something else. Again, we breathed in, slowly, then out again. He'd always say, when your breathing stays calm, your mind does too. Some days, my sister could barely finish, so I counted every breath with her, so she wouldn't have to do it alone. After that, I prepared her medicine, cooked her meals, then climbed the mountain behind our village, carrying 2 heavy buckets. At the very top was the only spring with water clean enough for her treatments. Every day, I carried those buckets home, then woke up and did it again. For 7 days, my dad taught me how to fight. Then, the day of the duel arrived. The best student stepped forward. He was twice my size. We bowed, then he attacked. Fast, powerful. Every punch, every kick missed by inches. I never swung back. I just moved again and again. The crowd started whispering, then laughing. His confidence started disappearing. Technique became frustration. Frustration became anger. His punches got wider. His kicks got slower. His breathing turned into gasps. Mine never changed. I could still hear my dad. When your breathing stays calm, your mind does too. Finally, he screamed, "Stop running!" That's when one of his teammates threw him a sword. The crowd gasped. He'd broken the rules. I looked toward the master, waiting for him to stop the match. He didn't. Then I heard another voice, "Catch!" I turned. My sister was standing, holding our old wooden practice sword. She smiled and tossed it to me. My dad always said, a sword doesn't beat another sword. The person holding it does. He charged. 1 step, 1 strike. His blade split in half. Silence. I looked at my dad, then at my sister. I raised my fist and got 2 in return. A group from the biggest dojo in He threw his microphone at our stylist. Nobody said a word. Not me, not the staff, not even our manager, because he knew exactly how much power he had. Every concert, the loudest screams were for him. He smiled for the cameras, signed every autograph, told every fan, "I love you." Then the second the cameras turned off, everything changed. Where's my food? Why am I waiting? Do your job. Every day, someone new went home crying. I just kept telling myself, make it to payday. My little sister needed surgery. 1 more paycheck and she'd finally have it. I finally asked our manager, why don't we kick him out? He looked at me, then said, if he leaves, so do the fans. So I stayed quiet. The next day, he walked into rehearsal, looked at all of us and smiled. Remember, without me, this group is nothing. Nobody argued, not because we agreed, because we were scared he was right. 3 days later, we started rehearsing for the biggest concert of our careers. He stopped the music, looked at our manager and smiled. I've changed my mind about my contract. The room went silent. He crossed his arms, cut everyone's share and give it to me. One of the dancers actually laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. No raise, no concert. I looked at our manager, waiting for him to finally say no. Instead, he lowered his head, then nodded, do it. 1 by 1, we signed. Every dollar he took was 1 less for my little sister's surgery. He smiled. I knew you'd make the right choice. Then, the night of our biggest concert, our sound engineer handed me my microphone. Remember, switch it off backstage. I smiled. I won't forget. The concert ended. The crowd erupted. He walked backstage. I followed him. My microphone was still on. He slammed the dressing room door. Where's my money? I carried this entire show. And someone get me my food. I want out of this dump. I've got a club to get to. He kept yelling at the dancers, the stylists, the makeup artists, everyone. Then he stopped. They were shouting. At first he smiled, thinking the fans wanted more. Then he listened. They don't need you. Again, louder. They don't need you. He looked up at the arena speakers. His face went pale. He ran back onto the stage. 20,000 fans were chanting, they don't need you. He looked at me, terrified. What did you do? I smiled. Nothing. You always said you made this group. Now let's see how you do without one. He threw his microphone at our stylist. Nobody said a word. Not me, not the staff. Not even our man. I put on my headset, ready to game with my friends, but I quickly realized it wasn't my friends I was hearing. It was two men, mid-sentence. The store closes at 10. The other replied, good. The owner's son usually stays behind to lock up. My hands froze because my parents owned a store. Just a few minutes away from my house, they had a Japanese restaurant, and every night after school, I helped them close. I leaned closer to my headset, and then I heard the back entrance doesn't have a camera. My stomach dropped. They weren't talking about some random store. They were talking about mine. I immediately messaged my friends, get online right now. Within minutes, 4 of them joined my lobby, but that was my biggest mistake because I heard the sound coming through their mic. They heard, and my heart stopped. The voices on the other end went completely silent. Then one of the men said, did you hear that? Nobody spoke. The other man replied, someone's listening. My entire body went cold. They knew. I instantly disconnected the call. I called my parents, no answer. I called again, nothing. I grabbed my bike and raced toward the store. The entire way there, I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't my store. But when I turned the corner, I saw the front door wide open. The lights were still on and something was wrong. Shelves had been knocked over. Glass was scattered across the floor. The cash register was open. But the strangest part was that nobody was there. No customers, no employees, no parents. I ran behind the counter calling their names. Mom, Dad, nothing. Then I noticed something on the floor. Footprints. Fresh, muddy footprints leading from the entrance straight toward the back room. I slowly followed them. My hands were shaking because when I looked back, I realized something. My own footprints were everywhere, going in and coming back out. But those footprints only went one direction, toward the back room. Whoever made them never left. I put on my headset, ready to game with my friends.
Oh my god!
Every Tuesday, my math tutor waited outside my school. He was always there 5 minutes early. Rain, snow, it didn't matter. Every lesson ended the same way. He'd pat me on the shoulder and say, I'm proud of you. I always thought that was a strange thing for a math tutor to say. Whenever I got a question right, he smiled, like he'd won something. And when I got one wrong, he never got frustrated. He'd just say, let's try again. One afternoon, I asked him, why do you care so much? He looked at me for a long time, then said, because I know what you're capable of. He never explained. After every lesson, he stood by the front door of his old rundown house, watching me walk all the way home. Only after I disappeared did he go back inside. I never understood why. Then, one day, halfway through our lesson, I asked, can I use your bathroom? He nodded. Second door on the left. While I was washing my hands, I opened the top cabinet looking for paper towels. But when I went to open it, something fell out. A photograph slipped onto the floor and I picked it up. It was me, maybe 3 years old, sitting on someone's shoulders. I turned it over and on the back were 2 words, my son. My heart stopped. I walked back into the living room holding the picture. Why do you have this? The color drained from his face. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Then he quietly said, I always wondered how long it would take. I stared at him. What are you talking about? He pulled out a chair and slowly sat down. I wasn't always your math tutor. I'm your father. I couldn't speak. He looked at the photograph. The accident took your memories. The doctor said the surgery would cost more than I could ever afford. The only family who could save you wanted to adopt you. So I signed the papers because losing you was better than burying you. I felt my eyes fill with tears. Then why didn't you tell me? He looked away. You finally had the childhood I always wanted you to have. I couldn't take that away. So instead, I settled for being your math tutor. That's when I realized every Tuesday he wasn't teaching me algebra. He was spending the only hour each week he got to be my dad. And every time he said, I'm proud of you, he wasn't talking to a student. He was talking to his son. Every Tuesday, my math tutor waited up. He hung a loogie right above my face. Pitting me to the ground. I begged him to stop. He just laughed. This happened almost every day. My older brother loved seeing me suffer. He'd make fun of my grades, push me around, and whenever I'd start smiling, he'd find a way to ruin it because he couldn't stand seeing me happy, and my parents never stopped him. As long as he got good grades, they didn't care what else he did. I was nothing like him. I struggled in school. I wasn't strong. I wasn't smart. I felt like I had nothing except Milo, my best friend, our dog. Milo was always there for me. Whenever my brother hurt me, Milo would sit beside me. Whenever I was upset, he'd make me smile, and my brother hated that because no matter what he did to me, I still had Milo. He'd walk into my room and see me laughing with him, then he'd just stare. He couldn't stand it. So one day he came up with a plan. He told our parents Milo was distracting him from studying. He said having a dog around was the reason his grades were slipping. My parents believed him and they gave Milo away. I begged them not to, but my brother just stood there smiling. He'd finally taken away the one thing that made me happy. That night I sat alone in my room and realized he had won. I had nobody left. So I stopped caring about school, stopped caring about my parents. I only cared about one thing, getting revenge. Every night after everyone went to sleep, I trained push-ups, sit-ups, squats again and again until my body couldn't move. Not yet. I got stronger until one day my brother came into my room. He shoved me onto the floor, pinned my arms down, and leaned over my face. I knew exactly what he was going to do. He smiled, but this time I didn't panic. He tried to hold me down. I pushed back. He pushed harder. Then I threw him off. He hit the floor, and for the first time, he looked scared. I stood over him and spat right in his face. Doesn't feel good being the weak one, does it? He hung a loogie right above my